City broadcast back to you again. With me, I got Myles. And the last time I talked to you guys, we talked about the first round of the draft. So I'm going to try to get to, a lot of the bigger stuff that's happened since the first round, which is for the most part, it's been free agency. And there was one trade that I kind of wanted to talk about. So with me, I got Myles. And for this podcast, I just kind of wanted to talk about the signings themselves for free agency. Even though I got Myles, the czar up there with John, I kind of figured we've talked enough about, everyone's got an opinion on the player agent system and how it can be improved or whatever. I thought for the vast majority, it was a huge success. So I just kind of wanted to talk about the signings themselves, the impact on the league, on the teams themselves, and all that fun stuff. To me, that's a lot more fun to talk about. So how you doing, Myles?
I'm doing good. Actually, before the show started, you told me we're exclusively talking about picks 51 through 60 of the draft.
Throwing a curveball in there. Yep.
I was ready to talk about Elijah Bryant.
Oh, we can do that.
That's it. That's all I had prepared.
Well, it's just going to be you talking for the entire time because I'm not even going to know who the picks 51 through 60 are. So.
But yeah, I'm happy to be on. Thanks for asking me to do this. I'm excited for the return of Choke City. It was listen to you and Brett and Marcos the first time. It was a good return for you guys. So I'm looking forward to being here.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting more of a regular, getting those regular scheduled broadcasts out there. So last season,
you have to compete with Chris though.
I do. Well, you know what? I'm going to try to compliment him. So, we can be a 1-2, kind of get some more podcasts out there. I mean, I figure, you can never have too many podcasts out there. So,
yeah, the people keep clamoring for more. So, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I love just listening to them like to and from work. So, if there's more people out there that want to do podcasts, let's get a third one going. I'm game for that. So, all right. So, without further ado, I figured let's start off by talking about the trade. Okay. So the big trade that, I kind of want to talk about here. So we already talked about the Donovan Mitchell, the Shaq Harrison part of this trade, because that happened during the draft. But the biggest trade since free agency, really the only major trade, all the others were for like second round picks and people no one care about. So the big thing here is Hassan Whiteside going from the Atlanta Hawks to the Magic, and George DePaula going from the Magic to the Hawks. So interesting to me, first take. Magic get another guy. They've already got a ton of big men, but they get another big guy that doesn't help their shooting situation. And the Hawks, from the outside, it looks like, their front court gets a little depleted. And now they've got a ton of point guards or guards and wings in general. So initial reaction to this trade, Myles, what are your thoughts?
Well, the first thing I thought from just a pure value in a vacuum perspective is that DePaula and Whiteside might be like the perfect like DePaula is to point guards what Whiteside is to big men. They're both flawed. They both are very elite in very specific categories. Those being the ones that you would ideally want your point guard or your center to be really good at, and they have that. And the rest of their game is not as well-rounded as you'd like some players to be. But, I think just from that perspective, DePaula and Whiteside make perfect trade partners. And I think this trade would have been perfect if Whiteside was going to the Hawks and DePaula was going to the Magic, just from a fit perspective too. But it's the other way around, and Atlanta gets themselves another guard to replace Damian Lillard in their 3 guard setup from last year, and the Magic get another big man who will presumably split time with Joel Embiid exclusively at center as they each play 24 minutes a game. Or actually they'll probably rotate playing. One will play 36 minutes, the other will play 12 minutes, and that's just kind of how it'll go.
Yeah. I kind of knew that the Orlando Magic were looking to trade George DePaula because, since I traded them Donovan Mitchell, from conversations I had had with Willie, I knew that he really wanted to run Donovan Mitchell at the point guard, which will be an interesting experiment. I was thinking about doing it myself. I was waiting for his weight to get down a little lower. It was a little too heavy for the point guard, but I'm curious to see how that plays out for him. But getting off on a tangent there. But I knew that they were looking to get rid of George DePaul. I know they had offered him around to a couple different teams. I think he almost went to Brooklyn, but then that trade fell through because I think the Philly GM disappeared because there was like a three-way going there. But I had talked to the Atlanta GM prior to this trade, just talking to him about, because he had asked my advice on it. So a lot of stuff here that I'm about to say, like he's already heard, but I like this from the perspective that Hassan Whiteside, I think he looks great during the regular season. He puts up nice, good numbers, but you can't count on him when it matters most. So when I was looking at it, if you look at Hassan Whiteside's minutes played, his regular season and his postseason, it's almost identical. So most of your, you want your elite players to play more minutes in the playoffs because you want to shorten your rotation. You want your best players playing more minutes. So a lot of times you'll see guys going from like 28, 29, 30 minutes to 35, 36 minutes a game because you don't want your bottom of the bench players playing when it really matters, when you need them. But if you look at Whiteside, he plays like 26, 27 minutes in the regular season, and that's what he plays in the postseason. To me, like that's 21, 22 minutes a game that you're going to have to fill going up against elite players, especially as you travel further in the playoffs. So to me, he looks great in the regular season. He's hard to count on in the postseason because he can't play big minutes because of his discipline issues. And then as a side note, I think Hassan Whiteside's defense, I think it looks good from the outside because he blocks so many shots. You think he's this huge interior defender. But while he'll get his blocks, if he's going up against a good offensive big man, it's really going to hurt. And again, when I was talking to Atlanta, they're trying to contend. So you're looking at, what teams you might match up with in the playoffs. And you look at the top teams in the East, the teams that immediately come to mind are Miami, Boston. And you look at those teams, they both got elite centers, very good offensive big men. You got Scal in Boston, you got Ben Simmons, Josh Smith, whoever the heck Miami's going to throw at center. And I think that was a big reason why Atlanta lost to Miami in 5 games. Like they just couldn't do anything. And Hassan Whiteside, I think he's a liability in the playoffs. So I think this is an interesting trade. I think GDP gives them a nice backcourt rotation where if they stagger their minutes so that GDP and Dante Exum, neither one is great from outside. GDP's okay. I think he's around like 33, 34%. He'll hold his own, but he's not going to – you don't necessarily want him playing with Exum. But they've got other shooters. They've got Drew Holiday. He can play the minutes GDP doesn't play at point guard, and he can also play some shooting guard. You got Vezenkov, who's very underrated, doesn't get talked about a lot. He can really shoot. Let's see what he shot last year. He shot 42% from 3. So, and he shoots, if he plays some more minutes, which I think he will play some more minutes this year, he can really open up that backcourt. So to me, I think having a really strong backcourt and wings was more important than having a center that you can't really count on for big minutes.
Yeah, that's absolutely fair. I think it works out better for them than I expected. Once you actually really go through the rotation. I don't see how Vezenkov is actually going to get increased minutes with Kentavious Caldwell-Pope also there. And then even though these players aren't as good, you got to expect that Trey Burke and Luke Kennard are going to play, especially Kennard, who you can kind of hope that they got to hope that he can be that gunner off the bench. Although maybe this is the year where they just, teams just stop playing him because he's not that guy. I don't know. But I absolutely agree. I think DePaula is, a good player there in Atlanta, especially since he can be out there when Exum's not and kind of help the offense continue to run while Exum's on the bench. I think staggering them is a really smart idea. I would also want to stagger maybe whoever their second best scorer is, whether that's Vesenkov or KCP or maybe Greg Monroe, to play with DePaula. And they'll play around with the rotations for sure, because it's a very well spread out team in terms of ability. So it could be anyone who steps up as that second best scorer. But that's kind of what I would want to do, is I'd kind of play with that, where when Exum's out, GDP and scorer number 2 are in the game to kind of ease that burden.
Yeah, no, totally agree. And I think, people are looking like, oh, their front court needs help. And yeah, it's definitely a little shallow, but they've got a ton of wings and guards. They can probably trade one. They have plenty of time. There's no rush. They can trade one to reinforce their front court.
Right. Well, and with Henson and Chris and Monroe and Michael Young, who had a okay rookie season, but a lot of people are high on his future. I think that they've got a good amount of kind of like role player big men. They don't have anyone who's kind of like a stalwart, for a fact that he's going to hold it down. I'm lower on Chris than I think some other people are. So I don't really see him as a starter, more as like a, bench big man, but they've got enough there that I think they can get by. Absolutely. If they find themselves in a situation where they could get a solid big man who they could trust to be out there 30 plus minutes a game, absolutely go for it. But I think as they're currently constructed, that front court is probably acceptable, maybe like C plus. But talking about Orlando, because something you mentioned a while back really, really interested me, going from DePaul at point guard to Donovan Mitchell at point guard is possibly the widest change that a team could make at a position, because DePaula is one of the best passers in the entire league, and Donovan Mitchell looks like he doesn't know that he's allowed to pass it to other people who are wearing the same jersey as him. Like, Mitchell looks like he's playing 1-on-9 out there. And obviously, Willie has experimented with non-traditional point guards, playing point guard before. Somehow he's managed to tell Robert Covington that he can play point guard without doing so in the game, because Covington's always, racking up the assists. But I'd be really curious to see how the rest of the Magic play on offense when their point guard is someone who's potentially going to be taking, 20 plus shots a game.
Yeah. I was going to say he played Wiggins at point guard for a while. And he actually did better than I thought he was going to do, Wiggins. I thought he'd turn it over like 5 times because his handling's pretty bad for a point guard. But Mitchell at least has that going for him. Like, Mitchell, if you look at everything but the passing rating, he looks really good. Like, he's a good rebounder, very good ball handler. He's 81, and that's only as a rookie. I believe that's only going to get higher. His defense is in the 70s. The only thing you got to worry about with Mitchell, other than the passing, is the weight right now. But I think Willie will work on that because he's 6'3", 205, which is still pretty heavy for a point guard. But what are they doing for big men? Now they've got Embiid and Whiteside. Like, is there another trade you think coming down the line?
No, I don't think so, because I don't think Willie will trade Embiid, or would have to. I think Willie would have to be blown away to trade Embiid. I think, honestly, me personally, I think they just go with a 3 big man rotation. Mm-hmm. Probably bring Whiteside off the bench, and then just move Embiid over to power forward. That's kind of what I would do. But he's going to do whatever he does. That's me personally. If I'm looking at this team and I'm not making a trade, Embiid's going to split the time between the 2 positions for me.
Yeah. No, I hear you. All right. So let's get to some free agency talk here. All right. So the first one, while I got you, first one that I kind of wanted to talk about, let me show my screen, is so you're the guys that you brought back, which are
my main 3: John Wall, Treveon Graham, and James Young.
Yes.
Commish Privilege was the 4th player that I re-signed.
Commish Privilege. Yes,
Shout out Ocon.
We were all thinking that. So let me see if I can go here. Okay. So are you happy with those signings? Like, what was your going in? You didn't really miss anybody. So I guess the big thing for you definitely wanted to get Wall back, right? Because you gave up a good amount for him last year. Are you happy with the signings as far as like the price you got? How does that impact you going forward? Are you planning, it looks like, to try to contend at least for the next 3 years while while Wall is there before he gets too
Yeah.
old.
Yeah, so bringing Wall back was definitely I felt I didn't really prioritize them because all three of them are very important to the team and instrumental to our success. For me, bringing all three of them back was definitely like a priority. I'm not going to sit here and say one of them was more important to me than the others. But looking back on it now and thinking about it, if I had taken that time to think about it, Wall definitely would have been my number one priority. And obviously he got the most money of the three. I didn't want to give him a full 3-year contract. I wanted to kind of give myself an opportunity 2 years from now in that offseason to then maybe re-sign Wall before the summer of Tatum's free agency. But the other teams came in with offers that were guaranteed or with player options or whatever it was. So I knew that, a team option was not going to cut it. That was not going to be looked favorably upon when John Wall's, entering his age 33 season. That's going to be something that would come back to bite me, and I couldn't afford to lose him. So I wanted to make sure that I got him. I think I paid a fair price for him. I think he'll be, very impactful for at least the next 2 seasons. The third season, that contract might be a little rough, but hopefully, Tatum will continue to grow, and James Young will be able to be one of my top players still at that point. So, and anything can happen. I mean, it's the CSL. Let's be real. Anything can happen by 2025.
Yeah.
So it's just one of those things that I was like, I've got to do it, and I'll figure it out later if it was worth it. But right now, I have to bring him back, because if I don't, then this team is right back to, probably an under 500 team, just because we were not going to have acceptable point guard play.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to start chasing Tatum at point guard, even though he's got pretty good handle. I'm not going to go that far with it, because he would just get blown by nonstop. Graham was very important. Graham is a 3-and-D guy. I knew that he was going to cost a pretty penny, because 3-and-D guys are valuable, but I knew him being a restricted free agent that I wasn't going to get into a bidding war. I was just going to put out my offer and see what happens with it. And other teams came in higher, and I was prepared for that. And James Young coming back was, I was very lucky that teams didn't go after James Young for whatever reason. And I'm very, very happy to have him back as well.
Yeah, I think, to touch upon your last comment there, like, I think just about everyone, would recognize that James Young's a very good talent. I think, he's considered a 6th man. He won 6th man of the year, but really he plays pretty much starter minutes. Like, he's a super sub, kind of, in my opinion. So, and also I think, the fact that, I think this was touched upon by a couple people earlier. The fact that this free agency, in my opinion, was one of the best as far as the strength of all the players. A lot of these people had to kind of pick who they were going to go after. You had a couple people throw out a million offers, but for the most part, like, some people kind of fell through the wayside, and kind of got steals. And I think a lot of that was just kind of the strength of the class. I think James Young was one of them. Now, with these 3 guys, was there anyone, like, were you close? Because you had mentioned John Wall. You didn't want to originally going in. You wanted to give yourself the option to get out of that 3rd year. Were any of these guys near your breaking point, as far as if it gets a little, if the salary gets a little higher, or if the years, get a little bit longer, I'm going to have to let them walk, or anything?
I mean, if someone came in with a 4-year offer for Wall, I would have had a thought long and hard about if I was going to try and match that, or if I was going to stick to my 3-year guns. Luckily for me, with Tatum still having 3 years left on his rookie deal, and being as good as he is, and then Tyler Stone having 3 years left on his incredibly team-friendly deal, like, those 2 things actually were really, helpful for me, kind of looking forward and seeing, like, okay, like, I can kind of afford to pay John Wall $14 million in 3 seasons, because I think I'll be okay elsewhere.
Yeah.
Drummond's already under contract for 3 seasons. Yeah, he's being paid $21 million, but it's kind of like the devil, like, I know that I have to pay him that money, so I can kind of plan around that. If someone, like I said, if someone came in with that 4th year, and I'm looking at that 4th year, and Tatum, I'm gonna have to re-sign Tatum that summer, Drummond would be a free agent that summer.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can bring back Tyler Stone at a reasonable price or get someone to replace that level of production at that price. Like then I'd be sitting here going, well, I might have to do a team option on that 4th year because I don't want to lose out on something else because I guaranteed, $16 million or whatever to a 37-year-old John Wall.
Yeah, that would not be fun. Now, this is kind of a way to, this will lead into the next one I want to look at. But if someone had thrown a max 4-year contract at Travion Graham, max raises, max everything, would you have had to think about it, or would you have still matched?
I probably would have had to walk away from that.
Okay.
I would have done the math. Like I haven't done the math on that. I have no idea.
Okay.
But more likely than not, I would have had to walk away just because as much as I love Travion Graham and as much as he's done for this team and the time that I've had him, 13 million or whatever. Yeah. 13 million that he would have started 13, at and probably 16 million, 17 million by that last year. Like there are ways to replace what he does that don't cost that much money. Yeah. I would have had to get, it would have meant more minutes for Terrence Ross, but Terrence Ross can shoot. He can't play defense, but he can shoot. Or, maybe then I go out and I try to sign in a year. I don't know, one of these like defensive dudes that always get drafted and get thrown by the wayside because they're just not as good as we were hoping they were, and hoping that guy can be a defensive wing. But there's no way I'd be paying $14 million a year for a limited 3-and-D player because Graham is limited. His handle is atrocious. His discipline isn't great, and so I do kind of have to play around that.
Yeah, I think going in, I was thinking, probably fair for him is probably somewhere between 8 and 10. It's hard to say for these restricted free agents because you just don't know what they're going to get. You don't know if teams are going to be like, or if GMs are going to look at some of these restricted free agents and be like, they're going to match no matter what, or as long as I throw a reasonable offer. So
that definitely happened with some of those restricted free agents. Sure. Like there were definitely a few restricted free agents that I think got under market value because of that fact. And there's nothing we can do about that. I think I would have gone up to about 11 million. I think it just my gut feeling, I think when I was thinking about it before he signed, I think I would have gone up to 11, but luckily I didn't have to answer that question.
Yeah. No, I think you, with all 3 of these guys, you paid pretty fair. I don't think you overpaid or whatnot for any of those guys. And like Graham and Young, they're role players, but to me, they're, you look at the teams that win titles, like they're not going to make all-stars. They're not going to make the all-star teams, but those are the guys like Travion Graham. Yeah, he's flawed. You touched upon those, but he will keep teams from zoning you because his scoring's high enough and he shoots well enough from 3. Like he does that very, very well. So if you get zoned, he's going to go off. And he plays good enough defense that he's not a liability. Like a lot of the times, you get guys like, they shoot really well and they're terrible on defense, so they're giving up as many points as they're making. So to me, he's kind of a rare guy. I would love a guy like that for my team. I've been looking. Easier said than done to get them for your team. So I really like that signing. And James Young, he killed me off the bench.
I was wondering if you were going to mention that because you kept kind of dancing around like, James Young, he's a pretty good player. Like, he's kind of a super sub. And I was like, I'm thinking like, he's the only reason I went to 7 games with you.
Well, he's like, it was a pick your poison for me. Like, John Wall was killing me the first few games. So I kind of ended up going to a zone, to kind of limit him because I just didn't have the point guards to stop John Wall. So I was like, well, let's at least stop him from driving every other thing. And then that's when James Young just started going off. But it's one of those things like you have to pick your poison. Like, do I let John Wall continue to get like near triple doubles on me? Or do I let James Young? And James Young, like you said, like he did, help you win a lot of those games. Tatum played really well too, but James Young was the guy that stood out for me. For the guy that I just had to let go off. And, I got lucky, I won in 7 games. So that's kind of like a coin flip there. But so this will lead us into our next one. To me, this was the most interesting. D'Angelo Russell signing with the Lakers.
This was Definitely one of the more interesting ones. It's not in the signed contracts one,
Okay.
because I think for restricted offers we didn't move it over
Yeah.
until I don't remember. We didn't move it over for some reason.
Yep.
D'Angelo Russell, that was like the perfect. Like I was talking to Rizzo, because it sucked that it was him that was dealing with it. I like Rizzo and he's a good guy and he does a lot for the league. That shouldn't stop anyone from targeting him in free agency. Absolutely. So you see a chance to get a guy like D'Angelo Russell, you go ahead and you take it. And I was telling him, I'm like, dude, he was just right there on the cusp of like, he's not worth a max, but that's the price that a team would have to pay to take him away. Jamal Murray, Mario Hazonia, trying to think of some of the other restricted free agents that didn't get a max offer. Those are the two that come to mind. Those guys are probably better than D'Angelo Russell. Well, definitely better than D'Angelo Russell. Those guys are both probably worth a maximum contract.
Mm-hmm.
But they weren't going to get it because the Pistons would match. The Clippers would almost certainly match. You look then, all right, who's the next best guy? Who's the next best restricted free agent? It's probably D'Angelo Russell. Do the Nets match that? It's enough of a question that it's worth the offer. It's worth tying up your cap space. And so that's the way the Lakers went. They went after Justice Winslow early in free agency and changed their mind. Went after Russell instead. And I think Rizzo made the right decision in the long term, but that doesn't help him feel any better right now. So
yeah, you like to touch upon what you were saying. For me, it's interesting. Like restricted free agency is a very interesting animal to me, where the best players, like you take out Dunn and Cat, who did get full max contract raises from their mother team. You take out those guys. All to me, like the next best players, your Hazonias, your Murrays, they got slightly less than maxes. But then, like this is restricted free agency is interesting, where the guys who are worse have a higher chance. Like if you're pretty good, you have a better chance of getting maxed than if you're like in that next tier up. Just because, like you were saying, like the Murrays, like if someone had maxed Murray, I have no doubt John would have matched. So
and that's why he didn't get max, because
exactly.
everyone else knew the same thing.
Whereas Russell is a worse player. I think even Tim would admit that Russell's a worse player than Murray, but Russell got maxed because there's a chance that he could actually, he's potentially attainable. So it's interesting that a worse player gets more money just because he's worse, and the mother team would value him less. But so to me, that's really interesting. But I can kind of see both sides of this. The Lakers side, I know from talking to Tim, he will admit that it's an overpay, and to me, it's a sizable overpay. I wouldn't have gone over 10 million. But the Lakers had a huge need. Well, they have needs all over their roster,
except for the front court. The front court's pretty good.
Well, it depends on where I guess they keep what's his name, Musa, their first round pick this year. It depends on where they put him, but they had a humongous need at point guard, so he does kind of fit a hole there. I know that Tim really likes Russell's game. He likes the fact that he's like a combo guard. He can score. He can do a little bit of everything. And I believe, he said he's got some big contracts coming off the books the next year or 2 years. So he doesn't really have cap limitations going forward. Like this is going to be his only big contract. And so I kind of get that from the Lakers' point of view. But at the same time, I think if I were Adam, I wouldn't have matched either. They've got some good players coming up, and to me, that's just too much money in a player that, to me, on a true contender, Russell's not a starter. To me, he's one of the first guys coming in off the bench. He's a good player, but if he's starting, if I'm another contender, that's a guy I'm going to try to target.
Yeah,
a potential weakness if he's a starter.
Well, absolutely. And I think the thing with the Nets, and I don't know if Adam, if this was what put Adam over the edge, this is kind of when I was thinking about it, what put me over the edge is if you match that contract as Brooklyn, there's going to come a time where you're going to have to trade D'Angelo Russell. Like with the team that they've got and the contracts they've got coming up, Russell is not going to see the whole length of that contract with Brooklyn. Not unless they sacrifice better things in order to do that. And I don't think that's the right decision to make. With the Lakers, and you said that you wouldn't have given Russell that money. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if Tim would have given Russell that money if he was running the Phoenix Suns. I think because of the situation that the Lakers are in, if you guys switch places, I think you might have offered Russell the exact same contract that that Tim did, because I think that's the situation the Lakers are in. They can afford to take on that contract, and there's a world where Russell lives out all 4 years on that contract as a contributing member of the Los Angeles Lakers. But that wasn't his future in Brooklyn. And, I don't know if I would have wanted to take on a contract knowing that the clock has started on me trading that player.
Yeah, just looking real quick at, Adam's roster, he's got Fred VanVleet, who's a free agent next year, Malachi Richardson, who's a free agent next year, Pascal Siakam is a free agent next year. In 2 years, you got Myles Turner. I just don't see, if you give Russell that max contract, they're going to be in cap hell starting next year going forward, sort of thing.
And also the 4th year of that deal, which would have been the biggest part of the deal, is the year that Rashad Vaughn's a free agent, DeAndre Ayton's a free agent.
Yeah.
You've already given Turner his next contract, or hopefully given Turner's next contract, and didn't let him walk. So now you're talking about two other guys that are going to get 8 figures. Ayton will probably be worth a max at that point if he continues to improve. So it just becomes, at that point, you're looking at it and it's like, you don't want that headache.
Yeah. Now I will say, as far as I think right now just about any contract is tradable, but I think this is just my opinion, I think over the next year, 2 years, 3 years, I think it's going to be harder and harder, because the one thing I noticed with this past free agency, there's definitely, I'm not saying there aren't steals, because there were a few, but there's a lot less steals. And if there are steals, it's much less than it used to be. Like, just from my example, you look at the 2 guys I signed, the 2 bigger guys I signed, Isaiah Austin and Akara White. Akara White was making like $10 million in his previous contract. Isaiah Austin, I think, was making like $11 million. So, and that's because that's what the game was asking for him. That's what their demand was. So I gave them their demand, and I knew that they'd sign, and they did. Whereas now you have to at least come close to what their actual value is. So to me, I think it's cap space is right now, pretty much any contract is tradable to some teams. But I think it's going to get harder and harder, because cap space is going to become more and more limited as there are fewer and fewer steals. And to me, that's good for the league, because teams are going to have to get smarter with their free agent acquisitions. Because one thing I've definitely hated in the past, and it even happened sometimes this year, players or GMs were just looking to sign any player to just acquire an asset that they can trade. Well, now you're going to have to, if you can acquire a player that you really like and it's an overpay, you may not mind. But if you're acquiring a player that you just want to trade and you're overpaying for that guy, you may not break even. If you trade him, you may have to add another asset to get rid of that contract down the line, sort of thing. So to me, I think that'll be an interesting dynamic to pay attention to going forward.
Yeah, and touching on the Okara White thing, as the person who put in all these contracts and set up the file, I remember putting in Okara's contract, and I remember seeing, because you had mentioned it before, so I kind of took the moment to to look, and Okara's demands were like starting at like 9 million, or it might have even been less than that, and I was like, yeah, because if Phoenix offers him this contract, he's staying in Phoenix.
Yeah, it's just one of those things that's just, I think it's just a flawed thing that the game, when it's, determining the demand, it doesn't look at things it should, as far as because Akara White was Defensive Player of the Year, even in game, not counting our voting. Like, even in game, you look at his awards and, he's winning Defensive Player of the Year, all over the place, all defense first team. So he's like winning all of these awards.
Yeah, 3-time defensive player, 4-time defensive, five-time defensive player of the year per the game.
He's won a boatload of awards, and to me, I almost think it's like tied. I think scoring rating.
Scoring rating plays a huge part. I'll tell you, Tim Quarterman wanted a max contract for like the first 10 days of free agency. There were like 3 players that hadn't signed their contract when we sent out the file. One of them was Tim Quarterman, because his demand to not come lower than like 11 million. And Tim Quarterman is a fine player, and he's going to do great in New York, and that's all good and well. But dude has scored 11 and a half points per game, and provides more or less nothing else.
Yeah.
So
the next kind of team that I want to talk about, Sacramento Kings and their free agency. I don't think that's been touched upon nearly as much as I think it should. So going in, they had a ton of free agents to re-sign. They re-signed just about all of them. I think the only one they didn't re-sign was Rubio. If I know they signed.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. They brought back everyone but Rubio, and I think they had like a second round player in the past year who was a free agent. Like Deng Adele is still there, but it was someone like that. Chinanu Onyuaku or one of those guys. They didn't bring him back, so they didn't get everyone.
They didn't get everyone.
They had to sacrifice someone, but they did sacrifice Rubio because Miami came in with the Godfather offer for Rubio.
Yeah,
gave him like $17 million for a year. Good for him.
Yeah. So, but they re-signed just about everyone else. I know the Solomon contract was a lot higher than they wanted to. The Nurkic, I think, was a little higher than they wanted to give. Now, I don't think Nurkic's contract is nearly as bad just because he's younger. He's 29. So you look at that, he's not going to start declining until year 4. So he'll be 32. He'll be 33 in the last year of his contract. So maybe that year he'll be, a little bloated, not the best contract. But for the first 3-4 years, it's going to be a solid salary. The Solomon one is going to be tricky to me because he's already 31, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, he's 31. So he's going to be 32, 33. He's going to be 34 in the last year of his contract. And he's going to be paying him $18 million just about. Now, I don't blame them because if they want to repeat this year, and I know that's what they're going to try to do, they needed to re-sign Solomon. They couldn't let him walk because he's such a big part of their team. But for Ryan, I know he's so fiscally responsible. I know he was not a big fan. But I know he got, Solomon was one of the guys that got price driven.
Well, here's the funny thing about Solomon to me. Richard Solomon is the unrestricted version of D'Angelo Russell, in my opinion. I'm not saying that Solomon is not one of the marquee free agents, but was he like the marquee free agent? Absolutely not. There was, you could probably say there was at least 6 or 7 free agents available before you'd even think about Richard Solomon. But the thing is that for some of these guys, once it was clear for certain of those players, like Dante Exum, for example, is going, Atlanta gives him the full max, or I don't know why I'm drawing a blank on all the Alfred Payton signs a full max in Cleveland. Once it's clear that a lot of these players are not going to be available, you kind of start looking around at like, okay, who is attainable? And you look at Sacramento with 4 marquee free agents and a 31-year-old Richard Solomon. And absolutely, I could easily see a team saying that's the guy that if I overpay him, I might have to make the Kings think twice about re-signing him. And so even though, in a vacuum, like maybe would I rather have Julius Randle? Would I maybe rather have Paul George? Maybe, sure. But it was easier for Miami to go after Richard Solomon than it was to go after some of these other players. And that kind of is what happened.
I was trying to remember. You're right, because
because they went after Isaiah Austin too, and so there's another part of it. It's like, okay, Isaiah Austin's a player that they could go after, and they did, but it was pretty clear that Austin they were not going to be able to get, and so that kind of became a moment where they went after Solomon hard.
Yeah, and I know at least from my end, I think this was Miami's plan. I think this is his strategy as far as making both Sacramento and myself pay good money to keep our players. Like I think he knew he probably wouldn't get either one, but I think his goal was, look, if I can sign him, great. If not, at least I'm making fellow contenders pay good money. Because before Miami put in a big contract offer on Austin, I was not worried at all about losing Austin. Because the teams that were putting in maxes, I forget who they all were, but
Charlotte was one of them.
It was like teams that aren't true contenders. So I'd find it really hard, unless I was really lowballing Austin, to lose him. But Miami, their play for winner is probably higher than mine because they've made the finals the last 2 years. So that was one of those things where like, okay, now I gotta up my offer to a good amount. I actually offered a 5th year. I think I went back and forth with Austin whether I wanted to offer 4 or 5, but after Miami put in a full, so I ended up adding a 5th year, just to kind of, he's younger than Solomon, so I think BT didn't want to put in a 5th year because he's going to be pretty old by then. But yeah, I mean, I plan on at least making sure people return the favor with Miami when their guys start coming up for because they've got some guys coming up, but I'm sure he's got it all planned out. Not to go off on a tangent, but I think that was a big reason why he traded Dozier for Bird.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I even think he mentioned that it was partially financially driven.
He may have, just to kind of stagger and buy himself a couple more years where Bird's on a cheap contract for another 2 years. Whereas Dozier, I think is he a restricted free agent next year?
Next year, yeah, and I think that's kind of like BT talks about, how hard it is to remain a contender, and one of the big things you have to do when you're a contender is make financially driven moves, even if it makes you a worse team. That's what he did with the Elfrid Payton trade, and you have to make those smart moves where you have to be able to recognize where can you take a step back. PJ Dozier is undoubtedly a more impactful player right now than Jabari Bird. Dozier's been a huge part of Miami's success, but they had to recognize that was an area where they could save some money, keep some flexibility, and future flex. I mean, not obviously not this season where Dozier's making like $2 million or whatever, but keep that flexibility moving forward and get like 70% of the on-court impact.
Yeah. I think just to clarify myself, Dozier looks like he's got 2 more years before he's a restricted free agent. So he bought himself another year, but still. But actually, point does remain. You actually brought this up. That was the next team I kind of want to talk about for Cleveland. So they signed Elfrid Payton to a full max. How old is Elfrid Payton? He's 30.
He's going to be 34 in the 5th year of that deal.
He is, but I think I think in his prime, I think Elfrid Payton's a max contract guy. 34 his last year. I know it's a player option. There's no way he opts out of that over 21 million. I'd be very, very shocked. So I think he's going to play the full 5 years. But again, he's one of those teams similarly to why, BT Ryan re-signed Solomon. Like, look, if he wants to contend, his roster is built to contend now. He's got to pay the future. The year 4 and 5 are going to hurt for Payton. But if he wants to contend for like this year, next year, with his other core guys, because Blake Griffin's going to be getting older too. Like he's got to pay what he's got to pay. Because if he loses out on Payton, then he's got to start to rebuild. Because
that's the price you pay for these elite players. I really badly wanted Payton when he was available at the trade deadline. I couldn't find a deal that would make it work because I would also, in order to do that, I was going to have to find a taker for John Wall. And why would you trade for John Wall if Elfrid Payton's in the deal? Why not just trade for Elfrid Payton? So finding a 3-team trade where I convinced a team to take John Wall instead of Elfrid Payton was not an easy one. Yeah. Just the age thing mainly, and since they were both going to be free agents, it wasn't like you were going to get 3 years of Wall versus 1 year of Payton and then potentially lose him. But I think this is a fantastic deal for Cleveland. Obviously, it was the most they could pay him, and so in that aspect, they couldn't have done worse in terms of a contract. But they needed to keep him, and in a weird way, I think this actually works out really well for them because in 2 years, after 2 seasons, Blake Griffin's contract is up, and who knows where he'll be as a player. Oladipo's contract is up in 3 years. So I think in 2025, we could see Cleveland be a team that, either in that offseason before that season or the trade deadline or some point during the season, they could make some big moves, sending Payton and Oladipo to contenders. And getting kind of kickstarting a rebuild that way. Griffin walks in free agency, and now they've got both Payton and Oladipo to trade. And I think that works out well for them. So, who knows if that's what happens. He may retool and still be a good team in a few years, but I think it gives them that flexibility And I think there'll still be takers for those two players in 2 years.
Yeah, he's got some time to think about what he wants to do. I know right now he's focused on winning, and you got to respect that. And they've got some of the players to do it. And even like you were mentioning, 2025 at that point, yeah, Oladipo will be like 33, but and he's making a lot of money, but it'll be an expiring, so it'll be a lot easier to get rid of him because it's an expiring contract. You'll have a lot more teams more willing to take on that contract. So. Like they'll have options going forward. I know he paid a lot more money for Blake Griffin than he wanted to. I think he said going in, he mentioned somewhere that like going in, his max was like 12 million or something like that, but he ended up going by it. And I think teams knew that because he was committed at that point. Like he couldn't let Griffin walk away. Otherwise,
not once he gave up max to Peyton.
No. So, yeah, he did what he had to do, and he's going to have a really good team for this year, next year, and 2025. He's going to start, I think, like you mentioned, once because Griffin will be like 36. I think he'll be a shell of himself by then. But yeah. So, all right. So the next one,
nice little 2-year window here for Cleveland.
Yeah, they'll certainly be a lot of fun to watch, especially a full year of Peyton. Because now they'll be able to use him, I think, a little bit better. Maybe
and a Peyton Oladipo backcourt, especially.
Yeah, that's right. Was Oladipo a new acquisition? Did they acquire him this offseason?
Yes, they did. They in a trade with Curry and Butler.
Yeah, so it's a very good defensive backcourt there. So, all right. So the next one I want to talk about, this is a bigger one. This is one of the biggest signings. Paul George going to New Orleans. Now, I know myself, admittedly, I wasn't paying too much attention to Paul George or what was going on. I didn't look at, what he valued or anything, but I just saw he went to the New Orleans Pelicans, which, of course, I was like, son of a bitch, because, of course, I've got the New Orleans first-round pick. Because at first I'm like, why would Paul George sign with New Orleans? But, when you come down and you look at, I think there were only 3 teams that were really going all in for Paul George. You had the Clippers, if I remember correctly, the New Orleans Pelicans, and the Washington Wizards.
Yeah, but those are the 3 that were sending in like serious offers for him.
I think Washington, Gary got cheap, and I think even he'll admit that.
Houston got cheap too. I think Houston put in an offer and they were cheap as well.
That doesn't surprise me, but but when you're looking at Washington here, you got so they put in, I think it was I thought it was a 3 years. Admittedly, I didn't see that their 3rd year was a team option. So you can't blame Paul George, especially at this point in his career, turning down an extra 2 guaranteed years. That's over $33 million he's going to make those last 2 years. Yeah, and he does team up with a team that's got Anthony Davis. So there is some star power there as well. So for me, it really came down to the Pelicans and Clippers. And I think if I remember correctly, the Clippers offer was pretty similar.
I pulled up the reasoning because I was the one that this was like one of the first signings where like we realized behind the scenes like, okay, maybe we should tell people why we're doing what we're doing. Maybe they actually want to know more information. I will admit that I was a little bit too heavy-handed with the player agents at first. I just wanted to make sure that I would rather us make a mistake of not saying anything versus saying the wrong thing and making a mistake that way, because I think the last thing I ever wanted to do in this league was give people in the CSL like the starting of a fire. I didn't want to hand them the firewood and be like, here you go. Here's some gas. Here's some lighters. Go for it. I was like, in my head, I was like, I'm going to let them make their own fire. And they did. So I was like, all right.
We don't need any help for fires.
So that's when I was like, all right, so we got to start explaining it. So my explanation, with the Clippers and the New Orleans thing, basically what it came down to, the fact was, yes, the Clippers offered 360 versus the New Orleans 464. And you look at that and you go, okay, well, Paul George can probably make more than $4 million or $5 million or whatever the difference was in that 4th year. And he probably could, but that's not something that I was trying to limit how much thinking was going to have to be done by people.
Anticipation.
Exactly. Because we don't know. I mean, he might retire. You don't know.
Unless it's obvious. Yeah, you don't.
Yeah, exactly. Well, in this case, I don't think it was obvious, and I don't
Nope.
think that the when you're talking guaranteed money, for a player of his age, right? That's kind of stuff's important, and I think it just came down to we felt the offers were more or less equal, probably leaning Clippers, but Paul George was leaning Pelicans. And so because George was leaning Pelicans, we were like, you know what? That's the deal. That's why we wrote this algorithm. So Paul George chooses the Pelicans, and I think it makes New Orleans an interesting team. And I think Marcus thinks it makes New Orleans an interesting team with some of the things he's done.
He's put out some interesting articles. I'm not gonna lie. He's entertaining for the league for sure. He seems like a really cool guy. So I'm looking forward to his articles.
It's a brilliant endorsement of New York and what life in New York does to the brain, and being a Knicks fan does to your brain.
Is he a Knicks fan?
He unfortunately is a Knicks fan.
Oh,
I feel for the kid.
I feel bad for him. But yeah, what was that like? Did Paul George injure himself? Like, what was up with the broken nose article? I wasn't sure if that
it was not a DDS thing. I didn't see any injuries in the game, but he did say in the article that George was expected to be back by the regular season. So I think he was just having a little fun with it, and that's that's fine. Have fun in our league. That's what we want.
That was fun. That was a fun article. All right, so the next one I want to talk about, pretty similar.
Well, wait, hold on. We didn't even talk about the on-court stuff. Like Paul George and Anthony Davis at one point were the 1 and 2 players in the CSL. I think people don't. I think Anthony Davis has kind of been a little underrated lately because of just the injury issues, and New Orleans hasn't been relevant in a while. And I think people are thinking of Paul George as an old man and not someone who just averaged 24 points, 4 rebounds, almost 4 assists, 2 steals. These are still 2 top 5 players, definitely top 10 players. And then a whole lot of not much around them. What's their ceiling?
Oh, they're talent wise. I mean, yeah, when they were both in their prime and, take potential injuries out, this team as constructed, I think would still be a contender, even though the rest of their team is pretty weak outside of like Mo Harkless. Just the fact that you could have 2 like you were mentioning, to me, those were the 2 best players in the CSL. I think Anthony Davis, when he's healthy, is the best player in the CSL just because he can literally do everything. And Paul George, when he was he's another guy that could do everything.
I think they both have won MVPs as well.
I agree. Yeah. They've both won titles leading their teams, and they've both won MVPs. So it'll be interesting to see them teamed up. And George is getting older, but he's not that old. 34, for considering how high his ratings are, he's still got, 75 scoring. His defenses and steals are in the high 70s.
Yeah, he's got at least 2 years,
maybe even, and his 3. Efficiency is still going to be as good as always. So they're going to be a contender. They should be, just as long as those guys can stay healthy, which I know that's an if. I think people are sleeping on Anthony Davis, not just because of the injury. I think it's been a while since Jace left. There's kind of been a vacuum there from GM. Hopefully Marcus can fill that void. I think, like you mentioned, just New Orleans in general has just not been very relevant. So people kind of forget about Davis, because you look at his stats and stuff, he's been putting up great numbers, but either there hasn't been a GM or a brand new GM or something like that. And just, people just haven't really been paying attention to the Pelicans, but I think people are going to have to start paying attention now. And to answer your question, as far as ceiling, I think if things go well, their players stay healthy. To me, the biggest question mark is going to be how good of a coach can Marcus be, or how good of a GM can he put more guys around them? Because if he can do something, I know he's got limited other assets, but if he could do that, I don't think it's out of the realm to think that this team could be like a 4 seed in the West and make some noise come playoff time.
Right, and that is obviously including Phoenix as the 3 seed and then me as the 1 seed. So sure, yeah, they could be a 4 seed.
Oh, I thought that was assumed. I didn't even think that had to be.
Okay, perfect. To make sure on the
page. Kings will be the 2.
Yep.
You're the 1. I'm the 3.
Thunder have rebuilt by this point, so they don't have anyone left on their team. Anyway, so moving on.
Who knows? Yeah, I feel like they get enough attention, so we'll skip them. But yeah, so going on to Harden. Phenomenal signing, I think, for the Rockets. I know it's
Here's your 2 seed.
controversial.
Here's your 2 seed.
Yeah. The Rockets are with the signing of Harden, I think they're up there with the Kings as far as the front runners in the West right now. Now Brett made a good point to me when I was talking to him about it. You look at their stars. You got Kemba Walker, Monk, Harden, Cat, and it's like, how can this team be beat? They've got so many good players. And Brett made a good point. You know, if you look at the players that he accumulated on Dallas, you know, he'd make the argument that his team was even better.
Rose,
as far as just
Paul George,
younger Paul George.
Yeah,
he had Harden as well.
but I don't think he had Harden at the same time as Rose.
Okay. He did have Serge Ibaka,
younger Serge Ibaka, younger Kenneth Faried.
So
and Rashad Vaughn, like rookie deal Rashad Vaughn.
He had, you know, good supporting depth too, because I remember he had Crab coming off the bench.
Yep, Crab was good.
Ed Davis, like, yeah. So he, you look from a talent standpoint, Houston's right up there with where Dallas was, but Dallas didn't win any titles. They didn't even make the finals. So I know a lot of teams are just penciling Houston in, at least the representative from the Western Conference. To me, like, let's see how it plays out. They very well could. I think they're probably the most talented on paper. And
Dallas
I know
also had Curry. I forgot about that. Dallas also had Stephen Curry.
I totally forgot about. How can you forget about Steph Curry? Yeah. So yeah, the Dallas team was very talented. Now, also Brett made a good point. I think the West was stronger at the time that Dallas was also very strong. Like, I know I still had Bledsoe and MKG at the time. So I know obviously the Kings were always a force. So I think the West is weaker now. So maybe Houston, maybe if Dallas had their players right now, maybe they could make the finals. Maybe they were just unlucky in, you know, the era, you know, that they accumulated that talent. But they'll be interesting to see with James Harden. Are you afraid that they have too many cooks in the kitchen, so to speak, as far as, you know, only one person can shoot the ball?
If this was real life, yeah. But this is not real life. This is DDS, and I don't think that is going to make a difference, because I think that, like, yes, you're going to limit the, you know, the impact of like Monk, for example, or Harden, who the number one thing that they do is score. Like, that's like, but far and away the thing that they're best at. You know, Towns at least provides the defense and the rebounding. Walker brings the defense. But at the same time, like when we saw the 2010 Miami Heat struggle, we saw them struggle with just being comfortable on the court. Like, LeBron and Dwayne Wade just did not look comfortable out there playing with each other at first. They didn't know, like, you know, when was it their turn, or am I taking too many shots?
Who gets the last shot?
Yeah, and stuff like that. Stuff like that really, you know, made a difference to that team at first. And obviously they figured out and they clicked. But, you know, there was a time there when that was an issue for them, and I think that surfaced in the playoffs too. I don't think that kind of stuff makes a difference in DDS. I don't think Kemba Walker's out there wondering when he's allowed to shoot the ball, or James Harden's pouting when he doesn't have the ball in his hands and standing at half court with his hands on his hips like he does in real life. So I just don't think that this is going to be, I think they're going to be fine. I think all of them will have lower usage rates than they're used to, and their points per game might go down, but their efficiency isn't going to suffer for it, I don't think.
No, I actually think that some of their efficiencies might actually go up, because I found as players take fewer shots, it's almost like if they're taking fewer shots, it's because they're forcing less and their efficiency goes up. Like, they're only shooting when they're actually open. So I think their offense is going to be the best in the league. Their offense is phenomenal between Kemba, Monk, Harden, Cat. I'm sure they've got a ton of 3-point shooters coming in off the bench. Porter, I haven't even touched upon Porter. I know I've said this before. I don't think Porter lasts the year in Houston, not because I don't think, you know, Kyrus drafted Porter to trade him, and I don't think that he's like a bad fit in Houston. I just think for the Houston's window, which you got Walker that's 33, you got Harden that's 33, and Harden's a free agent after this year, unrestricted. So I think like their time to win is now, and I believe Porter is relatively raw. Yeah,
He's
I'm looking
really
at his
raw.
ratings now.
He's
He's
really
really
raw.
raw. So even if he has a good training camp, unless he jumps astronomical, does it make sense to have an asset like that sitting on the bench as opposed to now, I don't think he's going to trade him right away. I think he's going to look for the right trade. I think he's going to look to see where the deficiency are on his team, and there's no rush to trade Porter. He's got plenty of time before the trade deadline. So, but I do think Porter gets traded before whether it's to shore up that fifth starter spot or the bench, or just a better fit for what they to win a title this year. Yeah, so I don't think Porter.
Well, that's the thing with a team like Houston is that outside their top four, the rest of the roster. I mean, they've got Bender, they have Looney. I know he likes Eric Mika, but it's not like they've got a ton of depth. It's not like they've got a ton of role players that are going to be able to step in with this top four and Kyrus can trust them. And so when you have a player like Michael Porter, who has a lot of trade value, doesn't have a lot of on-court value currently, is sitting on the bench getting splinters, watching other players fail. I just don't really see how he lasts the year. Just saying, we're 7 deep, and I don't mind the fact that I have a dead, roster spot for a guy who should be good in 2 years or 3 years. Yeah. That's the kind of thing where like you can say all you want right now, and I'm sure that he's absolutely telling the truth when he says that he's not considering Porter a trade chip, and he didn't draft Porter to trade him, and all of that is probably true. But that doesn't change the fact that when January rolls around and he's sitting there going, who the hell is going to play on this team when players go to the bench, and people are PMing him saying, hey, is Porter available? That could be it. That could change things.
Yep. Totally agree. I think to move on to the last big free agent signing that I wanted to talk about was Bryce Cotton going to the Wizards. So this was another interesting one. I thought this would be a cool one to end on. So he left the Utah Jazz. He signed a big 3-year contract. To me, I thought this contract offer was pretty funny because I believe Gary just outbid Adam, like he saw what the max bid that Adam could give, and he just went a little bit over it because I think Adams was like 14.1 mil or something like that, and he just went a little bit over it, and it was pretty clear from the get-go that Kevin was not willing to go anywhere near that. He did offer a longer contract, but I think he was only offering like 8.5 or 9 million a year. So to me, this was kind of a no-brainer for Bryce Cotton to take that contract from Washington. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, so let's start with the Brooklyn one because obviously that was kind of a point of contention with Adam, being that he felt he didn't have a opportunity to respond to the Wizards contract offer. That was one of those where even if Rizzo had, put out the best offer he could have put out in that situation, Bryce was still going to Washington. So unless, Adam went to 4 years at that point, which I don't think he would have done anyway, that's really the only thing Bryce missed out on by not waiting. But, we had kind of decided we had left this whole situation just been sitting out there for too long, and there'd been plenty of opportunities to get offers in, and Utah was, had been waiting. So we didn't think Bryce was going to get a better offer than what he had with Washington. By the way, Washington offered him the exact same that Brooklyn offered him. It was literally the exact same dollar amount that Brooklyn could offer him because that was all of Brooklyn's cap space.
So basically, he was just making it so that if Bryce Cotton signed somewhere, like it wasn't going to be for the money.
But here's the thing: is like if Washington had offered the same deal Brooklyn offered with a team option instead of a player option, so they were like literally the exact same, like Cotton's still taking that deal and he's still going to Washington. So, and Utah's offer was was close in that the guaranteed money was similar, but Washington still had that beat by a pretty clear amount, and it was also over 3 years instead of 4. So Utah was really not in it, unfortunately for them.
Now, was Cotton's I'm trying to look at him here. Was his loyalty relatively? No, his loyalty was pretty high, but I guess the
So
money
his
was just too big of a.
so here's the thing is it was everything was relative, right? And so loyalty being high and greed being high meant that we kind of had to take both into account, right? If loyalty was low but greed was also low, then it would have been the same thing. All these ratings kind of are relative to each other, and so it's kind of tough when like for example, Trevion Graham. Graham had 17 loyalty, but he had 24 greed. Neither of those things really come. Yeah, neither of those things really come into play because he was a restricted free agent and he wasn't even considering my offer anyway because there were other teams.
He just doesn't care
offers.
about anything. Trevion Graham.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's just one of those situations where Cotton's loyalty and greed are each like above 80, so they're both important to him. Yeah, he wants to remain loyal to the organization that he was just with, but he also wants to get paid. And so when it's not close, and loyalty and greed are the same, we kind of have to we don't throw them out, but they kind of cancel each other out.
Yeah, that's an interesting tidbit to know going forward. It's not necessarily the value of what their greed is. It's more relative to their other ratings. That's something interesting.
Yeah, the other thing too with that is that like that was just talking about greed and loyalty like as a function of each other. The other part of it is play for winner, playing time, the team situation, all that stuff, all played the players' ratings with relation to the players' ratings on the teams he would be signing with relation to playing time. Anyway, all this stuff creates right this value, right? And so, for example, going back to Paul George. Paul George was deciding between the Clippers and the Pelicans, and if greed was the number one thing and nothing else mattered, then there's a good chance that maybe he takes that Clippers deal instead of the Pelicans deal. But his greed was below 60, if I remember correctly. It was like mid to high 50s.
It's like right around 60, it looks like.
Yeah, and
at least according to DDS.
Yeah, and you're talking about an offer where New Orleans was better than the Clippers. So that's a situation where the interest level does play into it. But like, I'm trying to think who had really high greed. Like Justice Winslow had really high greed, or I think Julius Randle had really high greed. And that's a situation where even if your team is a terrible fit for that player, like, Julius Randle's greed is like 99. And his play for winner is also like 99. But a team that's not very good could get Julius Randle because the money would have been the difference maker. Yeah. So going back to Cotton and going back to all this stuff, and this is something that, as we start working on our second version of this for next offseason, will, be a lot of stuff that we'll explain to everyone. The loyalty mattered, the greed mattered. And so because they both mattered, they both at the same time didn't matter. You know what I mean?
No, I hear you. Yeah, I'm just looking at Randall now. He is a greedy dude.
Yeah, him, Hazonia, and some of the other people. There were like 4 or 5 people in free agency with greed like above 90. And I was like, all right, well, that means we basically are going to throw out the interest rating number, more or less, just because at the end of the day for them, money is everything.
Just look at whoever's giving the most money. That makes sense then that John had to pay so much to keep him.
I know John didn't want to do that, but commish privilege.
Commish privilege. That goes without saying. I hope Kevin listens to this. But I don't think John keeps Randall around for the entirety of the contract, but that's just my opinion. I think he just didn't want to let Randall walk. I think he's gone by the end of the year. But maybe I'm wrong. But
some spicy takes here. But to talk about Cotton in Washington, I think it's a great deal because I know Gary likes playing Myles at shooting guard. That he's capable of being a point guard, and obviously he's very good. He almost averaged 6 assists, but I know that Gary, from helping him put in depth charts over the season, that he likes playing Teodosic as shooting guard. I think that's where Teodosic really kind of lets him, be his scoring self versus his playmaking self. And so getting a player like Cotton, who he felt he could really trust at point guard, was going to be a difference maker because, he was playing guys like Shabazz Napier and Austin Rivers at point guard who are fine, but they're not Bryce Cotton. And so I think that's going to be a huge piece for Gary next season.
No, that's a huge win for Gary. So what do you think this does for his team? Because I forget what seed he was in the playoffs last year. He was 46 and
He was
36.
like the 7th seed or 8th seed.
That's
he was
right,
like one of the
so many
teams
teams with he just right, because Brooklyn was like 45 and 37 or something. But yeah, does the signing of Bryce Cotton, does this propel them into maybe, four in the conversation at least for 4 or 5 seed?
Let's see. Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's tough because they lost Greg Monroe, or Al Horford, or whatever big man that they had by the end of the season, or maybe they had both and they didn't have Tavares. Yeah, they had Monroe and Horford, and they're both gone. And yeah, they got Cauley Stein, and Rab is a really good player, and he'll be back from injury. And Anik Bogu is an interesting big man who should be getting more playing time. I mean, obviously he had a lot of good big men last year. Plus, he just drafted Thomas Welsh, and I think Caboclo can play power forward. So they have a lot of people who can play big men, but Monroe and Horford and Henson.
He did also bring in a guy that's won a title, Darian Atkins from the Phoenix Suns. So
and
he's got him in on.
You cannot overestimate the
championship experience he's going to be bringing to that
impact.
Team.
But I think that's where it's tough for me. It's like, yeah, they really upgraded in the backcourt, but they also really downgraded in the front court. And that's even taking into account that they got Willie Cauley-Stein, who I think is a really good defensive big man, but also might suffer from that like Hassan Whiteside syndrome of, can he play more than 25 to 27 minutes a game? I really tried when he was with me. I literally just left him out there for 48 minutes, and luckily he's got really good durability and really good endurance, so he can kind of do it. But I think let's see, how many minutes did he play a game with me in his final season? 31. I got him up to 31 minutes a game in the regular season, and that was with my sub matrix, literally having him in all 48 minutes of the game.
Why does he struggle so much? His discipline doesn't look like it's that low, is it? It looks like it's
foul a lot.
71.
I don't know.
It's 71. That's not bad, right? That's
I think that's like right at the borderline of acceptable. But I think when you've got a big man who goes for steals, who blocks shots, I think that kind of hampers it. I don't know if you can see fouls in the player card. It doesn't look like you can, but I know he had foul trouble with us when he was with us. So you can see disqualifications all the way there, but you can't see personal foul.
No, you can't. Just the amount of DQs.
Yeah, fouled out of 7 games for us, so that's not bad. Out of 82.
That's what he did last year. Yeah, he averaged 2.8 fouls. That's not terrible.
But in 22 minutes?
Yeah.
What was that per 36?
Nope, that's per game.
No. What was it per 36?
4.3.
Yeah, so that's not bad. I mean, it's not bad, but that's the thing. That's one of the drawbacks with DDS is that, even if you set your player rotation really low and you're okay with them playing through fouls, like DDS will pull them, and there's nothing we can really do about that. So, that's where Cauley-Stein is limited, but could be a good replacement for Henson. I don't know. I think the problem for me with the Wizards is just that they don't have a number 2. They really haven't had one. And Teodosic is fantastic, but it's just Teodosic and a lot of good but not great players. And I think that's going to limit, their ceiling.
Yeah, I like Marble, but he's more of a number 4, number 5 guy. Austin Rivers could be good off the bench. He's got I think he's a pretty good scorer.
I mean, in my mind, their best chance of getting that second leading scorer is Rab, and I'm not that confident in Rab being a really strong scorer. Also, I just realized his torn ACL is still another 4.5 months, which puts him out until the beginning of January, I believe.
Yeah. Yep. Just about
that. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see if anyone steps up. But that's the thing is to me Teodosic and also to me Teodosic isn't number 1 anyway. But in the CSL, you don't really need that guy. I think many teams now have proven that you can be a contender without having your typical number one scorer. You can have like 3 number twos, and be fine.
It's interesting. I know, like you look at Milos's ratings, and he's got an 88 scoring. To me, that screams number one. But you look at his stats, even on a team that didn't really have, like you mentioned, like a number two, he only averaged 19 points. So I'd expect a guy that had, you know, 88 scoring rating. But I almost wonder if it's almost. I remember Steph Curry was similar to this. Like, I wonder if it's the passing rating.
Yeah, the passing. So my understanding, and having not like had conversations with Gary, but he's pretty not Gary Washington, but Gary, creator of the game. He's on the forum, the Wolverine Studios forum enough, and I've emailed with him about other things. Passing rating and scoring rating both also include like tendency. It's not just ability, but also tendency. And so, which I think is a mistake, but that's neither here nor there. And so Teodosic has a really good scoring ability and a high tendency to score, but he's also a very strong passer and has a tendency to pass. And so, you got a player out there who's kind of split between the two. He's never going to be a 30-point per game scorer. You look at all the top scorers, they don't have incredibly high passing ratings. Because they're it just goes to show they're not always looking to pass. So I think that's what limits Teodosic. It makes him a very well-rounded player, but it doesn't make him a number one scorer.
Now, do you think him playing a majority of his minutes at shooting guard, do you think that'll help at all?
Absolutely.
Especially if he's got a facilitator like Cotton loves to pass the ball. So unless they both just keep passing back and forth to one another, someone's got to take the shot there.
Yeah, I definitely think it'll help. I also think if Gary goes with a isolation scoring or offensive strategy, that'll help because that boosts the scoring tendencies of players with high scoring ratings. And Teodosic has the highest scoring rating on the team. I don't know if that'll help him win games though. I just know that'll help Teodosic's numbers. Sure. But I do think that there's something very real to like positional tendencies in DDS, especially with the two bookend positions where point guards tend to have the most assists because they tend to be the have a playmaking boost, I think, in terms of just like how they approach the game. And then same thing with centers in terms of rebounding and shot blocking. If you take the exact same player, right, if you take just on my team Tyler Stone and Andre Drummond, and you just flip the position they play, like if we simmed a whole season with Stone at center and Drummond at power forward, and we simmed a whole season the other way around, you would see a distinction in the numbers in rebounds and shot blocking. You would see whoever plays center would have a boost versus when they played power forward. It's just one of the things that is coded into DDS3. And so I think if you have a player that isn't being aggressive enough as a scorer, moving him off the point guard position is one of the easiest steps you can take to making him a more aggressive scorer.
That's interesting. Now, real quick, how does the losing Bryce Cotton, how does that affect Utah? Do you think it makes a big impact going forward, or whatnot?
I only think it makes a big impact in that they don't have players that are like acceptable quality to step up and take those minutes. Like I think if they had Tyler Ennis, for example, they'd be fine. Or if they had I don't know, one of those guys, Tyler Ulis, any point guard named Tyler, really, I guess, would be fine. But unfortunately, they don't have someone named Tyler, and that's really going to hold them back. No, I think what it really just comes down to is that, like, I personally, for me, like, I like Bryce Cotton. I think Bryce Cotton is a good player. I don't think he is the difference between like a good team and a great team. I think Cotton's more like the player that takes an average team and makes them a good team. And so I don't think Utah is going to miss Cotton in that respect, but I think they're going to miss Cotton because you look at their roster, who else is playing those minutes right now? Their other guards are D'Anthony Melton, who's rawer than Michael Porter. You've got Kadeem Allen. Yeah, no, I don't want to play Kadeem Allen. You got Bronson Koenig. Maybe what they do is they move Kyrie back to point guard and they play Koenig and Jones at shooting guard, and that's all that there is to it. But they don't have anyone that can play point guard other than Kyrie. And so I think that's really like the main issue. And that's what's going to hurt them more than anything else.
Yeah, no, I agree for the most part. I don't think Cotton was going to be a huge, I don't think losing Cotton is going to have a huge impact on their team as far as like wins losses at the end of the year. Um, just because they brought in a Kyrie Irving, so I think that would have kind of. I know they were going to play them both together and stuff, but I think that kind of mitigates the need for Cotton. But like you mentioned, other than Kyrie Irving, they're going to be struggling for. It's going to have to be Melton. I think he's like the only capable one, even though he's
not.
he's even though he's not. At least his maybe he'll have a really good uh, training camp.
Well, and
Because I
Daniel
know he does
Hamilton
have.
actually has really interesting ratings. He's got 77 handle and 72 pass, and he's pretty skinny. So maybe we see Hamilton as the backup point guard. I mean, this team is really thin. This team is really thin, but like they're like, model thin. But Kyrie Irving and Porzingis are probably one of the best 1-2 punches in the league. Period. End of sentence. And you've got Hamilton, Jang, Fuquan Edwin, and Papagiannis, who all can be role players. I think, really, like, this is actually a team that could make the playoffs. I think the Jazz will make the playoffs if Kevin, fills out the roster with a few more CSL quality guards, and then that way they're not relying on Bronson Koenig or Jalen Jones or D'Anthony Melton to play real minutes.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see how they are with a full year of Kyrie Irving. You always got to make the caveat with a thin team is what if, one of their guys gets injured. But you could say that about most teams.
Yeah.
Like if a star goes down
my
on
team.
any team.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, but yeah, if Solomon or Westbrook goes down on Kings, they're a vastly different team. Like even the deeper teams, like if a star goes down, it changes everything. So you got to look at what's there. And it's not like any of their guys, I don't think anyway, have like recurring injury issues.
No,
But yeah, you
Porzingis
got
had a really bad injury a while back, but that was really it. Like once he got through that, he hasn't had one again. He's really durable. Just going through, like, Kyrie's pretty durable for the most part. So yeah, I think they're fine in that respect.
Yeah, I definitely think they fight for the playoffs. Trying to think. I mean, yeah, you got to figure Houston's got to be like a lock. Who knows about OKC? Who knows? I mean, because the rumors are that they just traded Kawhi, so maybe they're going full rebuild. You got to figure Portland's going to be right up there. They were 51s. They had 51s last year. I don't think they got worse. The Nuggets, that team's a scrub team. They're going to be falling off the map.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, then the fact that the Nuggets won any games last year is really a surprise. They should have gone 0-82.
Especially in the playoffs. They were going up against the juggernaut Suns. The Suns almost choked it away, but they waited one more series before they choked in the playoffs. But yeah, the West is definitely weaker than the East. So yeah, I could definitely see the Utah Jazz making the playoffs, at least making a push. I think there's a decent amount of teams because Spurs are vastly improved. The Pelicans are vastly improved. Unfortunately, the Warriors took a bit of a tumble, but the Clippers are
and
vastly improved.
There's another domino in the West is where does Kevin Durant go? If Kevin Durant gets traded to a team in the West, then that strengthens another team out here. Because right now Durant is going to be, putting up, MVP-ish numbers on a team that's going to be, winning 30 games. So
he's another guy that, like, he's old, but he still puts up ridiculous numbers. He put up 24 points last year.
Yeah. So that's another one where that could drastically change, what we expect in the playoff picture in the West.
Yeah.
Hold on. I got to write something down. PM Jeff about Durant. Okay, cool.
That's totally unrelated, right? That's
totally unrelated. It's a different Durant and a different Jeff entirely. It's actually a guy that lives near me and his son, Devin Durant.
I buy that. But yeah, he put up 24 points on a team while sharing, the court with James Harden. So
yeah, that's the other thing is Harden. I mean, Harden did it last year. Harden's done it for the last few years of his career. Has shared the court with a bunch of scorers, so he can do it.
Yeah, I'm excited for the season start.
Yeah, me
But
too. I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to the training camp. I really like, especially training camp, because I really didn't scout very much last year. So, and I haven't really taken the time to look at all the rookies. So I'm kind of wait at this point. I'm like, I'll just wait till training camp is run, and then I'll see how they all look after that. So
I'm the same. Last year I did not scout a ton. I scouted like point guards, and that was pretty much it. Other than like maybe a couple guys that I thought I might target late in the draft. But yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to seeing a lot of these guys.
yeah, I can't wait to post about how much of a bust Shaq Harrison is because he didn't improve at all.
Oh, that would be depressing. But you never know.
It make me very happy. Depressing for one of us.
Yeah, don't you just want everyone to be happy? I mean, if Shaq has a really good camp, that'll make you sad. So I guess we can't all be happy.
Yeah, see,
But
exactly.
I mean, I had such a black hole at point guard last year. No one I put back there worked. It was just like I have a bunch of guys that are, they're solid guys. Like during the regular season, they're fine. TJ McConnell puts up fine numbers during the regular season. Whitehead's pretty good.
Smith
Ish
is
Smith's
fine.
pretty
Yeah.
good. But when you go against the elite point guards, like you can't just put in an average, like a replacement level guy, an average guy. That works in the regular season. It does not work in the playoffs.
No, you found that out firsthand.
Oh yeah. Well, I got swept last year, and I almost lost in the first round this year, and then Sacramento just wiped the floor with me in the second round. So, yeah. So, all right. I think that'll do us here for the Choke City podcast. Myles, thanks for coming on. I'll definitely invite you on. You're welcome to come on the show anytime.
What if the show's not even going? Can I just jump on at any time, and even if you're not here?
Absolutely. I mean, it's gonna tank. The show's gonna tank without me, but you're more than welcome to hop on the show anytime. So
thanks for having me on. Like I said, I'm glad that you're back and doing this. Looking forward to hearing the rest of them.
Yeah, this is a lot of fun. All right. So that'll do us here. And thanks again, Myles. And hopefully I have you on here again soon.